It began as peaceful protests in Syria, but soon escalated into a full-scale civil war.
After a decade of conflict, in the middle of a global pandemic, and faced with a steady stream of new crises, Syria has fallen off the front page.
The Syrian conflict has killed more than 500,000 people, forced nearly 12 million Syrians to flee for their lives, and led to one of the worst humanitarian tragedies since World War II and the largest refugee crisis of our time. No end is in sight.
You have a huge range of actors fighting it out in the same space, and that makes it incredibly difficult to come to a peace deal of any real meaning. You have Assad and his Russian backers. You have the rebels, who are now largely contained in the Idlib pocket, with some support from Turkey. You have Turkish troops in northeast Syria. You have Kurdish forces in eastern Syria. You have US and Russian patrols on the ground. You've had jihadi groups. And there's also a huge range of much smaller militias, criminal gangs. The numbers are endless.
As civil war raged, a rising extremist threat was waging a campaign of terror across Syria and Iraq and adding yet another dimension to an already complex conflict. All of this put Syria's government and opposition groups, regional players and world powers, terrorists and civilians on a collision course, pitting each side against one another on the battleground in the Middle East. But it also divided nations thousands of miles away here at the United Nations in New York. UN Security Council sessions on Syria were marked by repeated clashes, mainly between Russia and the US. Western nations staged walkouts in protest of Syria's government, and Russia and China vetoed stronger action against Damascus. Throughout this decade-long crisis, the UN's most powerful arm was largely deadlocked.
If a war lasts 10 years, the international security governance system that we have is not effective. And this is something that should be a source of reflection about everybody involved.
There have been some important outcomes from the Security Council in the form of humanitarian aid and the partial destruction of Syria's chemical weapons stockpile. But as the conflict enters its 11th year without an end in sight, the Syrian people continue to pay the highest price. Liling, CGTN at the United Nations.